Welcome, everybody, to part 3 of taking the fear out of fractions with Right Start Fractions. I'm your host. I'm Kathleen Cotter-Lawler, and we are going to talk today again about fractions. Now, this is, again, part 3. Part 1 was the basics of fractions. Part 2 is the addition and multiplication of fractions. And today in part 3, we're going to talk about division of fractions. When we talk with fractions or work with fractions, particularly with children, we want the children to use a linear fraction chart. And part 1 talks about this extensively, how it works, the relationships, what is a fraction. And this one, again, we're going to talk more about division. But when we look at this, for those of you, if you haven't seen part 1, which I highly recommend, just a real quick summary of the fraction chart. Here we've got 1 here broken into 2 equal pieces, which we call 1/2. Here it's broken into 3 equal pieces, 1/3, 4 equal pieces, 5 equal pieces, 6 equal pieces, all the way down. So again, we can see the relationships within the whole. So we allow the child to explore the whole picture, everything, and then the fractions within, or excuse me, the relationships within the whole using a linear perspective. Okay, today we're going to talk about dividing fractions. What's the rule? We invert and multiply. What? Why? Why does that work? I don't know. It just does. Well, actually, we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to show you exactly why it works. But before we do that, I want to start out with what is division. Division is the process of separating into equal groups. It's a process of separating into equal groups, either by the number of groups or by the size of the groups. So let me show you what I mean here, because that's a little bit confusing. So we're going to take 6 divided by 2. We all know the answer is 3. But what are we doing here is we're saying how many 2's are in 6. So here I have 6 little dots. I want to say how many groups of 2's are in here. Well, I've got 3 groups. That's one way of looking at division. There's another way of looking at it by saying how many groups or how many of these dots can I put into 2 equal groups? So here I'm going to put them into 2 groups. There's 3 in each group. That's the other way of looking at division. And we kind of need to know both of those so that when we look at fractions, we don't just look at it one way or the other. We need to see it into 2, or see it 2 different ways. So we're going to take our linear chart, and here I'm just going to work with the 1s, halves, thirds, and fourths. By the way, notice, and we talk about this in part 1, I call this fourths here in fraction class. I do not call it quarters, because there's a pattern. If I say 1, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, 1/7, there's a pattern. But if I say 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, you interrupt the pattern. And from a child's point of view, there's no pattern. It makes no sense. When actually there is, it's just that our language throws it. So again, in fraction class, refer to this one as fourths. Okay, so here I just again have the 1s, halves, thirds, and fourths. So we're going to start out with 1 divided by 1/2. So looking at this here, what we're doing is we're saying how many 1/2s are in 1? How many 1/2s are in 1? Well, here's my 1/2, and I'm going to pull it up here so I can start to count. So how many 1/2s, how many of these green things are in the whole 1? Well, there's going to be 1, 2 of them. Oh, that's the answer, 2. That's what division is when you're looking at fractions. How many 1/2s are in 1? Let's do another one real quick here. Let's do 1 divided by 1/3. Again, what am I asking? I'm asking how many 1/3s are in 1. So here's my 1/3. I'm going to pull it up on top. So I've got 1, 2, 3 of them, which I can also see down here, but sometimes it helps to see it up there. I mean, whichever. My answer is 3. So how many 1/4? 1 divided by 1/4 is going to be how many 1/4 are in 1? Answer would be 4. How many 1/5? 1 divided by 1/5 is how many 1/5 are in 1? 5. 1 divided by 1/6. How many 1/6 are in 1? There'd be 6 of them. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Oh dear. 1 divided by 2/3. Well, again, let's think our way through it. We're asking, well, first we'll have our chart. I'm going to ask how many 2/3 are in 1. So let's use our chart. Here's 2/3. I'm going to pull it up. How many 2/3 are in 1? So I've got 1 and not 2. Oh, it looks like it's going to be 1.5. Oh, okay. So my answer is 1.5. What's another way of saying 1.5? That would be 3/2. Let's do another one here. So my answer, 1 divided by 2/3 is 3/2. Let's do 1 divided by 3/4. Again, I'm asking how many 3/4 are in 1. So here's my 3/4. How many 3/4 are in there? Well, there's going to be 1 and definitely not 2. Let's break this into equal pieces. Oh, it'd be 1 1/3. 1 1/3. What's the other way of saying 1 1/3? It'd be the same thing as 4/3. So 1 divided by 3/4 is 4/3. We got something happening here. There's a pattern. 1 divided by 2/5. Again, I could use my chart, or again, look at my pattern. It's the reciprocal. I've flipped them. So 1 divided by 2/5 is 5/2. 1 divided by 5/8 is 8/5. 1 divided by 4/7 is 7/4. Now, of course, the same thing is happening over here. When I said 1 divided by 1/2, I could put a 1 under there and say it's 2 1s or 3 1s, but that's kind of redundant. Why do we need to do that? So we've got reciprocals happening. Guide the child to making the discovery that the answers are the inverted form of the divisors, which is the number by which a number is to be divided. So it's the reciprocal of the inverted form of the 2/3 is 3/2, of 3/4 is 4/3. That's not so bad. This is why this works. So what we want to do is we want to have the children practice this newfound knowledge by playing a card game. And again, in part 1, we have a lot of games to show you, or we showed you how to play a lot of games to work with fractions. Here's another game. This is going to be Fraction Division War. Our purpose is to practice dividing fractions and to help the child realize that the quotient, the answer, is the inverted form of the divisor. And our goal is to collect all or most of the cards by having the greatest quotient, or the highest answer. Like all war games, you want to try to get all the cards from your buddies. Now, if you have a family where maybe you've got a child who's a little bit, doesn't lose very well, maybe you just play the game for a specific amount of time, say 10 minutes or 20 minutes. That way you don't have a definite loser with no cards in their hand. All right, we've got 2 people playing here. We're going to lay out a ones, because we're going to say 1 divided by, and then everybody turns over a card. So 1 divided by 1/2 is, so again, I'm asking how many 1/2s fit in 1? Well, the answer would be 2. How many 1/4? 1 divided by 1/4 is how many 1/4 are in 1? Answer is 4. Who has the bigger answer? This guy does. 4 is bigger than 2, and he takes the cards. Next one, 1 divided by 3/8 and 1 divided by 2/3. 1 divided by 3/8 is 8/3. 1 divided by 2/3 is 3/2. Which is bigger? And again, if you need to, look at the chart and think your way through it. Well, 3/3 would be 1. Well, here I've got 8/3. So I've got almost 3 here. I've got 2 and 2/3. This one I have, well, 2/2 is going to be 1. So I've actually got 1.5. Well, this one's going to be bigger. So you see all the skills that we're using when we're playing this game. And again, have the children practice this. And the way that they're going to review it is through the games. The games become an application for what the children are learning. Because right now, your kids really don't care about dividing fractions. But if we're playing a game and they get a chance to beat daddy, they are all over it. All right, let's keep going with dividing fractions, because it's always not 1 divided by a number. Sometimes it's something else divided by a fraction. So we know from playing the game and working with it, 1 divided by 1/4 is, again, how many 1/4 go into 1? Well, there'd be 4 of them. So now what if I had 2 divided by 1/4? Well, that'd be 8, because it's twice as much, right? So if I had 1 divided by 1/4, so I have twice as much, my answer is going to be 8. Now, how are we actually doing this? What we're doing is we're saying it's 2 times 1 divided by 1/4. Here's my 1 divided by 1/4. We intuitively knew that answer. So it's 2 times 1 divided by 1/4. What's the other way of saying 1 divided by 1/4? Is 4. So 2 times 4 is 8, which is what we knew when we were intuitively coming up with the answer. We didn't use this middle stuff, but that's what we were doing very quickly. Let's do another one here. 3 divided by 1/4. Answer is, you're probably yelling at me, 12. Yes, the answer is 12. Again, what are you doing? You're saying it's 3 times 1 divided by 1/4, which is also known as 3 times 4, is 12. So what's, oh dear, 1/2 divided by 1/4? Well, again, intuitively, if you know that 1 divided by 1/4 is 4, half of that's going to be 2. Again, what's our process? We're saying 1/2 times 1 divided by 1/4, or 1/2 times 4 is 2. Let's do 1/3 divided by 1/4. Again, following the process now, we're going to say it's 1/3 times 1 divided by 1/4, or 1/3 times 4 is 4/3. Here's 3/4 divided by 1/4. Now this one, before we go through the process, think your way through it. How many 1/4 are in 3/4? So if I have 3/4, 1, 2, 3 of them, how many 1/4 are in there? When you think about it, the answer is going to be 3. But let's follow. Let's go through the algorithm and figure it out. So here's 3/4 times 1 divided by 1/4. So 3/4 times 4. I could say it as 12/4, or I could just simply say it as 3, which is what we had figured out using the linear chart. This is how we do it in a lesson book. Actually, this is in the Right Start Fractions book. So we do the same process. 1 divided by, and then we go up, and then we go down. So again, we're working through our process with this. And of course, we can play a game, the harder fraction war game. Same concept. We're just, again, it's an application for what we're learning. So we want the children to use this fraction chart. So we allow the child to explore the whole picture and the relationships within the whole using a linear perspective. In the Right Start Math program, fractions is taught all the way through. It's taught in levels A through F. There's more focuses in level D and F. That's kind of where we really, really work on some of this stuff here with fractions. There is a carve-out available if you have a program that you're committed to and you still need to work on some fractions. It's Right Start Fractions. We have the lesson book here. It comes as a kit where you've got the lessons, the worksheets, the fraction chart, and the card games. Right Start Math has received numerous awards for our approach and our method in teaching children. In conclusion, math needs to be taught, so 95% is understood and only 5% memorized. And unfortunately, quite often, we teach the other way around. But this is how we need to do it. So they need to understand why things work, why we invert and multiply. We need to understand that. Dr. Cotter says our goal as a teacher of mathematics is to help our children transform, expand, and refine these beginning ideas into deeper mathematical thinking. Thank you for watching the Taking the Fear Out of Fractions with Right Start Fractions. I hope you all have a wonderful day.